Okay, it looks like we're getting in position. This is always an interesting process to offer a meeting both remotely and in person at the same time. So we appreciate your understanding and patience as we try to figure all this out. I'm Gretchen Nichols with the Local Initiative Support Corporation. We're here working with the City of Brooklyn Park to continue our conversation that began in early 2020 around the old Park and Ride site, which is located at Noble Parkway and Highway 610. Tonight, we're going to be providing a very brief overview of all of the information that we provided or gathered in the first part of 2020 before we had to disband for COVID, the pandemic. But we're here to refresh our memories and to update our ideas and to take it from there to finish off this process. So I'm going to bring up Barbara Ray, who will be helping to facilitate tonight's meeting, and she's going to be giving us some guidance on how we're going to do this. You have to press it, I think, to
the button, and your light will turn green, and then talk.
Barbara, will you come and talk?
That's a good idea. So we're doing it so that the people online can hear us as well. So it is important to do what we said. And then how this works is we do have some people who are on, you have to talk close, who are on a Zoom link, right, Sarah? And Sarah's going to be monitoring that and those conversations and the chat. And if we have a question come up from the people online, hi everybody, we'll break into our conversation and make sure that their voice is heard and their questions are answered. So that's how it's going to work. Any questions?
Will you tell them if they want to ask a question to raise their
Oh,
hand?
yes. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand so that then we can monitor that. And the people on the Zoom call also have a raise your hand button at the bottom of their screen, and they'll be able to do that too.
Great.
Okay, are we ready? Welcome back. I know it's been a while since we had this conversation. How many of you were at the last 3 sessions? So a year or so ago, great memories to come back and great passion for the community to come back and be a part of the recap and the final recommendations. All right, so Paul, I think you're up.
Should be the combined. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome. Oh, yep, sorry. We'll get this technology thing figured out. It's been, what, 20 months? All right, looks like that's showing up on the Zoom. David, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the, thank you. All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Moguish. I'm the planning director here at the City of Brooklyn Park. I'm relatively new here. I started in June of this year, so I wasn't around when this park and ride development process began. So I'm really excited to be joining you and restarting this process and seeing what we can do here on the old park and ride site. So you know what this site is. That's why you're here. It's about seven acres. It was purchased by the city's Economic Development Authority in 2018 for about $1.2 million. And it's guided in the zoning and in the city's plans as as public institution, as a government use, because that's what it has been. It's been a park and ride. And so, we know that this is going to be something else in the future. It's not going to sit as a parking lot forever. I think we want it to be something that will serve the community and be a part of the city's future. And that's what this process is all about, is to provide some guidance for what this can be, so that when it's time to sell the property for development, we can have everything in place in terms of the zoning and community expectations and hopes for what this property can do to contribute to the community. So most of what we want to be doing in this process is hearing from you about what your ideas are. But we also have some other guidance in the big picture that we can use to help us through this process. So one of the things that's important to do is just look at who we are as a community and where we're going in the future. So who are we now? Well, we're the 6th largest city in the state. That was true in the last census in 2010, and we just had a new census in 2020 that has stayed the same. We're still the 6th largest city. We have a median age of 35, but we also have a higher proportion of young people, of people 18 and under, than the rest of the region and the rest of the state. This is overall a younger community than the surrounding area. We also have a lot of folks who were born outside the US. It's about 22-23% or so. And same goes for folks who speak the language other than English at home. We're also a very overall diverse community. In the last census in 2010, we were at just below 50% people of color. And now we're at about 60% in the 2020 census. So that the proportion of folks who are people of color in the community is growing in the city as it is in the region, but it's happening faster and sooner in Brooklyn Park than it is elsewhere. We're at 86,478 people as of the 2020 census. And where we're going is that number is going to keep going up. Over time, we expect in the next 20 years to grow to nearly 100,000. Maybe we'll hit 100,000 because we've actually been growing a little faster than we originally expected. So that's just a little bit of background about where the community is now and where we're going as we start to focus in on this property in particular and what role it can play. The other thing to consider is that there's been a lot of work done already in the community over the years on identifying what's really important to the residents of Brooklyn Park as we think about our future. This was a process that maybe some of you were involved in back in 2016 or so to develop goals for the future of Brooklyn Park. And so the community identified 6 2025 goals: a united community, beautiful places, a thriving economy, healthy and safe people, increased equity, and effective and engaging government. And so when we're thinking about how can we use this piece of property that the community owns, that the city owns, for the betterment of the community, we can look to these goals for some guidance to help shape what we want to see there. If you're interested in more, each of these goals has a lot more detail under them, and they're all on the city's website if you're interested in taking a closer look at that. And then finally, we have some more detailed goals about some of these topics that appear in the city's comprehensive plan. And I'll highlight 2 of those areas that may be relevant here for this piece of property. One, there's a series of goals related to economic development. So we want a robust local restaurant, retail, bioscience, precision manufacturing, and service market. As I mentioned, I've only been here a few months so far, but every day I hear from people that we want more restaurants in the community. So we hear you loud and clear about that. And also we have housing goals, okay? And I won't go through all of these either. You can feel free to read these on your own time, that you have the printout in front of you. And if you didn't get it, there are more printouts over on the table over there. But when it comes to housing, there's a couple of things that are really important here. One, we want to make sure that we keep what we have and maintain what we have and keep it high quality and maintain housing. We also want to make sure we're promoting a range of housing choices when it comes to affordability. People need to be able to afford where they're going to live. And along those lines, in order to do that, it's really important, goal number 5 there, to make sure that housing keeps getting produced, because as the population of the region and Brooklyn Park itself continues to go up, if we're not building enough housing to keep up with that population growth, it'll start to get really more expensive for everybody. So we need to make sure we're keeping up. So those are just some thoughts about the big picture as we start to focus in on this park and ride property. And before we recap what's happened so far, but before we get there, I just want to provide a little bit of an idea about what this whole process will look like going forward. So I think of it in about 4 steps. We're in step 1 right now. And just to be clear about expectations here, this is going to take a while. It's going to take a few years to get to the point where there are some buildings actually on the site. So here we are in step 1, where the purpose of this coming together is to just decide, what do we want to see happen on this site? What are the goals for development? So these are the Corridor Development Initiative workshops. That's what Gretchen and Barbara are taking us through. These workshops will inform what ends up in those goals, as will those 2025 community goals I was talking about, the 2040 comprehensive plan policies, as well as market information. We're going to hear from some developers tonight about their perspective about what's possible on the site. We want to make sure that the goals we develop are realistic and that a developer could actually deliver on them. So then after this process is complete, what we develop in these development goals will then inform a change to the zoning on the site. I mentioned before that it's zoned public institutional. That's just for government uses. We already have a city hall. We're not going to build another city hall. It's not going to be a government use on that site, more than likely. We'll have to change the zoning to something that reflects what comes out of this process to come up with the development goals. So that'll involve a process where the Planning Commission holds a public hearing and then makes a recommendation to the City Council to change the zoning, as well as what's in the comprehensive plan. After that happens, then we'll have everything that we need in place to start the process of actually selling the property. And so that will involve what's called a request for proposals that will include the development goals that we're working on together here. And then the zoning will be in place to allow what those development goals envision. Developers will then respond to that request for proposals, and a decision will be made about which developer to sell the property to. And the final step before any buildings are built is that the chosen developer will go through the city's usual plan review process. So anytime a developer is proposing a new building in the city, there's a process where city staff and the Planning Commission, which is made up of residents of the city, take a look at those plans and review them for compliance with the zoning code and for compliance with city policies. And then anybody has a chance to come speak to the Planning Commission about their thoughts about the development at a public hearing. And then the City Council makes the final decision before construction starts. So that's an overview of what comes next. If you notice on all those words on the right, the words in bold are times throughout the process where there's an opportunity for public input. So in step 1, the Corridor Development Initiative workshops, what we're doing right now. And in step 2, there's a public hearing on the zoning change at the Planning Commission. And then in step 4, there will be both a neighborhood meeting that the developer would lead, as well as the formal public hearing at the Planning Commission. So that's a mouthful. There's a lot more to come. If you have questions about the details of that, I'm happy to talk about that now or later in the evening as I'm kind of making the rounds. But I think what we want to do next is go back and reflect what we've heard so far in the process last year.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Paul.
We have time for a couple of questions if there's anyone who had a general question for Paul. Anybody on Zoom, Sarah, have comments in the chat or questions that we need to listen to?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, all right, then.
Very good. Thank you. I'm Gretchen Nichols. I'm just going to quickly run through what we covered in 3 community workshops back in February, March of 2020, and remind us that this last final phase is divided into 2 parts. One is tonight to refresh ourselves, and the second one will actually be reviewing and finalizing the recommendations for the city. So as we think about the site, we understand that it's in a geography that is surrounded by other elements. And so we wanted to make sure we were visualizing the area that was around this particular location and what it is that we think is informing what it could possibly be. We also recognize that Noble Parkway is a fairly high commuter transit corridor, so there's a lot of activity and traffic coming in through that area, as well as the 610. Around the area, we know there's the new transit station that's been built just to the west, and then also the sports park. There's the school, the Woodland Elementary School, as well along Noble Parkway. There are a couple commercial hubs just further to the west along Zane Avenue. The North Hennepin Community College is further to the west, and the Target Northern Campus. So just to recognize that there's a lot of different things more to the west. 610 is an important connector to a lot of those types of uses. Through this process too, we've been trying to help people appreciate that the developer has a perspective and the community has a perspective, and we're really looking for the intersect between those 2 ideas. The developer is trying to solve for a variety of things in regard to the market, to the costs, to the future, to the demand, the risk essentially to an investor. The community has a specific set of ideas and values, things that they think would be important for their community, the needs of the businesses, the opportunity to kind of make the place something special. All of those factors kind of come into play. And the idea through this workshop is to try to really understand the intersect between those 2. We also know that buildings and forms change over time. Many perceptions of multifamily are based on kind of older buildings and properties. And a lot has been done to improve design and character of these types of developments. So we just want to make sure we're keeping up to date on some of the different improvements that have happened in the market to help make these properties more appealing and good to live in. We also have talked a bit about the retail market trends, the fact that, especially as we know today, after our couple years here with COVID, that the markets are changing as we speak. There's a lot of dynamic changing conditions around retail, especially. Internet shopping has displaced a lot of the store-based retail. A lot of retailers are really looking for an experience retail opportunity. And shopping centers have had a couple different directions. Some have become weaker and not as much of a place that is helpful for the businesses, and other places are really going strong. So it's a little bit of a assessment and not as obvious around retail as we may think. One example of a large development site in this area recently is the 610 West Apartments. As you may know, up in northern Brooklyn Park, it was a new development, and it just gives a little bit of a visualization of what kind of maybe a possible scenario for this site here. The first workshop that we had really asked the participants to talk in small groups about what it was that was important about the area and to try to get some of their ideas about what they would like to see accomplished through investment and development. What's interesting is the sense that the site in specific has a lot of accessibility. The location is highly visible. The size of the site is large, which is a very nice quality. Strong neighborhoods and amenities are nearby, so it's a very good destination. Things that people thought could be accomplished would include generating income and jobs for people, offering new housing opportunities, thinking through some new commercial uses that would be interesting to have in the area, providing some sound barriers to block some of the noise from the freeway, amenities for recreation or water features, some safety improvements because it was noted that Noble Parkway is a very busy, again, roadway, and walking and navigating around it can feel very unsafe. By investing in this area, there'd be an additional tax base, and pretty much anything is better than as is, was the general feeling. Their concerns that were expressed around future development includes, if it's a commercial use, will it succeed? There was concern that there would be some potentially bad types of commercial retail uses. The concerns about gentrification and how increased values could push people and businesses out of the area. There were concerns raised about high density housing, poor quality materials and design, the potential for increased safety concerns, traffic and congestion, noise and pollution, and the importance of being respectful to the neighborhood nearby. The specific types of uses that the site could accommodate, these are just really interesting ideas that came out of the small groups previously. A lot of ideas around innovation centers, business centers. You almost were predicting where we were going with people working remotely. And it was really interesting to go back and remind ourselves about all the ideas that came up. The city of Brooklyn Park has been always interested in trying to find a location for commercial kitchen space, looking for potentially an area for entertainment or an ethnic food hall, maker spaces, breweries and wineries with food, restaurants that are not fast food, grocery stores, health services. Everyone was very creative and interesting thoughts about what might be interesting to accommodate this type of space. Regarding housing, there was ideas around senior housing, market rate rentals, mixed use with residential above first floor retail, and amenities might include like a cultural center, indoor playground space, passive green space, and skateboard parks for teenagers. And there's, I don't know if it's still being discussed, but an aquatic center was something that was of interest for some. So I wanted to take a pause here because, you know, we're 19 months later, and is there other things now that you think should be added to this list, or anything that you think no longer makes sense as you think about those ideas that came up earlier? Yeah, Rich.
Good evening, Liz, city staff, and residents in Brooklyn Park and those at home at Zoom. I had the opportunity to be part of the focus group with LISC and the redevelopment from the very beginning. The only thing one thing that concerns me is that there was only one bullet point about the concerns about the neighborhood, where the neighborhood that would be closely impacted there.
Mm-hmm.
There was several conversations about our concerns about what would go there, and to see there was more than being respectful to the neighborhood nearby, I wouldn't be doing my best if I didn't represent my neighborhood, because, you know, I kind of took their input, and there was concerns about not only what type of design would be there, more than there was concern about sound, there's concern about a plethora of things. And I was hoping before we went to quarantine, did you receive our letter from our neighborhood recommendations about what we would want to see as framing recommendations that you would take into your consideration and push forward to, I guess, the planning commission for your framing recommendations going forward?
Yes, we did receive that letter. And again, this, all of the bullets are just cherry picking a little bit of different ideas, but to your point, oh, sorry, we're getting. I think that is your reminder that there was a lot of interest from those residents that were living in proximity to the site, and there were a lot of ideas about what they were really wanting to not have there. So that will all be included in the report so that the city is well aware of that as well. And I hope through this process we're able to document it as well from the voices that are here, because they're all important. All of these perspectives are, we hope to capture all of that. So to your point, the letter will be included, not verbatim, but it will be embedded in the recommendations as we will review next week. Yes.
Hi, my name is Debbie Lenson. I live about 3/4 of a mile away from the Park and Ride. And I do like the idea of a restaurant, although now I guess when you're talking about being respectful of the neighbors in their backyard, I can see where that might have to be, you may have to tweak that or something. Otherwise, is there any chance we could put like a hardware store there? We don't have anything nearby, or I wonder if CVS would be interested in moving and building a large store over there, because a full-sized CVS or Walgreens would be good. But I wouldn't want to have Walgreens, you know, over and on that site, and then CVS to stay, because that wouldn't do anybody any good.
Thank you.
I have some feedback.
Can you hold it closer?
This better?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I live pretty close to the area. Would like to make a suggestion. So you mentioned grocery stores. I think a Fresh Time would be good for the area because there aren't any Fresh Times close. So you'd have to go to Plymouth to get to the closest one. So I think it would serve the area very well. And there are a lot of people coming into the area for groceries, whether it's Hy-Vee or Cub. And so Fresh Time would complement that offering. So I think that would be a good use for the space.
Great. And to let you know, all of these ideas were collected in the initial stage of this process. So even though this is a shortened list, it's good to reiterate some of those ideas because they are shared by others too. Yes. Will you use the microphone? Sorry. Press the button so that it records.
I would like to suggest that all new buildings like condos and apartment buildings and also single family homes, and I suggest this for actually the whole state, but especially Brooklyn Park, and I suggest that we have inclusive housing. What that means is that it's accessible to everybody, including people in wheelchairs, people who are disabled, people who cannot, who don't have good vision, so that anybody can live there. Now, what's going to happen in our state? It's expected that the aging people, the people above 75, will go up 236% in the next 20 years, and the younger people will actually decline. And what we need is a good labor force that includes women. And currently, nationwide, 40 million women are not working because they're taking care of aging parents. And if you have this inclusive housing that is built so that somebody who's disabled can function in it pretty well and just needs limited help, a a lot more women who are hoping to have careers can continue working in middle age. And that won't happen, especially if they have a strong, culture of intergenerational relationships and mutual help. Then they'll leave the workforce and probably take care of their parents or anyone else in the family who's disabled.
Thank you. That's a very good reminder. We've certainly appreciated the challenges that families have had through this process, through the pandemic, and we appreciate that those supports are important. Universal design is an important consideration in understanding how to provide accessible housing. Any questions online? Nope. Okay.
Yes, I've been trying to talk.
The
can
next
you hear me?
workshop included what we call a block exercise, where we're asking participants.
I've been trying to ask a question. You've been ignoring everybody on Zoom. Can you hear me? Miss? I have a suggestion. Can you hear me? Can you respond?
No, we can't hear you. Sorry, we're trying to figure out how to get your voice on.
Okay.
Will you say something now?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Whoops. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you very slightly, so
You need
speak
to raise your
clearly and
volume up
slowly.
then. That's probably what the issue is. So I have a suggestion too for that space. Have we considered putting an Olive Garden there? I mean, that
An
would be
Olive
one
Garden?
thing. Who doesn't like Olive Garden? First thing. Second thing, that's one option. Maybe another option would be to put a solar farm there that low income residents could subscribe to and that they would have an option for.
Great.
That's it.
Would you mind putting those ideas in the chat so we're sure to capture your information?
Sure.
I know I heard Olive Garden. I don't know if I heard the second one.
I said solar farm. A solar farm?
Sober farm.
No.
Solar farm.
Solar
Oh.
farm.
Thank you.
A solar farm for low income residents.
Got it. Solar farm for low income residents. Thank you. Okay. So moving forward, the block exercise created an opportunity for participants to pretend to be a developer for the day and what would they build on the site. And as they put their scenarios together, we had a financial tool that would kind of use the information and explain if it was a financially feasible project or not. So just as a quick reminder, there was a lot of really great ideas around a mix of market rate and different kinds of housing types, some around some retail and office space included. There was this very memorable scenario of a Dubai tower. I don't know if you remember those things, but they were just opportunities to kind of explore and create different versions of. No, I'm not having my thing to move. Different versions of potential sites. Some had no housing at all, just commercial space. Some had home ownership and some townhomes. There was one around Trader Joe's was a big idea for this table. So again, we were exploring opportunities that people thought would be a good fit for the site and getting a chance to see with the financial information if that was at all a feasible option. This one also had some housing and commercial spaces. The final session was a panel discussion with two developer, commercial brokers, David Wellington and Tom Hoffman. Thankfully, we have David Wellington with us here again tonight, but just to quickly overview some of the highlights from that earlier session. We asked, what do developers look for when deciding where to invest? Connectivity and access, and the site has a good access through the highway, transportation arteries and transit. The site is a flat grade and contiguous land. The size of the site is also appealing. The surrounding market, traffic counts, employer and residential density, all of those things kind of inform whether a developer is interested in the sites or not. What would you envision for the site? There was differing thoughts. One was that the design of the site will be important given the highway backs up onto the residential, the highway, and it also backs up into the residential. One panelist preferred retail and the other one preferred residential. Commercial did not seem to appeal, especially the co-worker space. People obviously still and did then want a sit-down restaurant. And here was just some ideas about how to think about that. The large square footage format is a factor, and the primary and the cost of labor, the mixed use project at Maple Grove, where one of two restaurants had struggled to keep going. The fourth restaurant is in its fourth year. It's just, this was a little bit of an anecdotal history of one site that was working toward a restaurant. And the fact that smaller restaurants with smaller ticket items would be a better anchor for the site. The fast casual quick service in the smaller bay, these types of restaurants have been proven to have more staying power. And that a lot of customers would likely be coming from Highway 61, not from the neighborhood. How can a developer work collaboratively with a neighborhood? It was suggested that a mixed use project that includes housing, height will be needed, so massing is a mismatch to lower height to housing nearby. So there are ways for design to shift perspective and to make it less of a jarring difference. The underground parking creates extra dirt, which you could use as a buffer or some sort of a barrier between the housing and the new development. So he was just suggesting that there may be ways to configure the design and the elements of the site that would minimize any misfits. And how to attract the right business and developer. To attract retail, show me where people live and work. Essentially, those are the things that inform where investments and businesses locate. Fast casuals draw youth, families, and people that run down Highway 610. A developer doesn't want a poorly operating strip mall either, so it's best to find a developer that's tied to the community and knows the market. And it was also commented that the city of Brooklyn Park is a really great partner for development because they have a very professional staff and strong leadership. So those were acknowledged as well. So just to quickly pause before we introduce our two developers that are here with us tonight, was there anything else that you remembered from the earlier sessions that you think should be highlighted at this point that stood out to you, either through the block exercise or the developer panel, that was memorable? And yeah, Rich.
On behalf of our block, we just wanted to say that blocks exercise was a great exercise to see it physically and to understand the financial aspect of it. That was something that was very insightful. As a point of information, is there any way we can show how close the development is to our neighborhood so we can express our concerns with that? But we know something's going to be there. We just ask that this will continually be something that will be brought up, is the noise and the aesthetics that has to pair up with the neighborhood that's like walking distance from that new development or that redevelopment. Thank you.
So to that point, this image, that scenario one foxglove, I know it may be hard to see, but the green pieces of paper represent the buffer between the development site and the housing behind it. So that essentially is the link, I guess, between the properties. But yeah, it is, whoever can, the visualization of the site and kind of appreciating its what's around it helps a lot. And the fact that it's flat gives you more options too, because you can try to negotiate certain points of design. Yes, back there.
Thank you. I didn't hear anybody.
We hold it closer. Thank you.
I didn't hear anybody mention low carbon energy, which would mean solar energy and excellent insulation and windows that don't let the cold in, and any other types of energy that will reduce our use of carbon. And I was surprised nobody has mentioned that, because we just had, we are continuing to have a huge amount of talk on the media about low carbon energy and what's going on in Europe and the Far East, and as well as the responsibility of the United States and of the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent points. Any other comments that we can move on to the developers? Thank you all for those additions.
Thanks, everyone. We have two developers this evening, David Wellington and Johnny Opara. And on your agenda, there are some proposed questions for them. I'm suggesting that they take turns and answer the first two, and we take a break and go back and answer the second two. So one is just their self-introduction and what they've been doing. The second is what, if anything, has changed since the 1.5-year pandemic, or what's changed in the market. So Johnny, do you want to start first?
Sure. Can you guys hear me clearly?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to the City of Brooklyn Park, LISC. Great to see the community is involved. Really excited about this opportunity. I live in Brooklyn Park, I live in Edinburgh. So I pass that site all the time. My kids actually go to Primrose in Champlin, so not too far. So that Cup Foods and the Burger King, the McDonald's, I'm a constant commuter for my kids there. So my name is Johnny Opara. My company is JO Companies, and I'm a developer. Started my company back in 2009. Things really took off in 2018. And I primarily focus on affordable housing developments. So I probably can't speak intelligently on the market rate side, but I know enough. But I would say that my company really focuses on projects that really speak to me personally. My father was a part of affordable housing before he passed. So a lot of the comments that were made by the community in terms of, I believe there was a comment surrounding the solar farm and inclusive housing. Really touched me. So I think at the end of the day, for me, it's really important to make sure that the community is involved in all the projects I'm involved in. We have a partner in the city, and we try to find common ground, right? Because this is a very sensitive topic when it comes to doing developments where people live, right? And as a resident of Brooklyn Park, it'd be pretty cool to, one day partner with the city on an exciting project, such as this. But, for me, actually within the next few weeks, we'll be closing my first project called The Hollows, which is a multifamily development in St. Paul, where I'm from, overlooking downtown, providing 62 apartments for families and individuals making modest incomes. And, that project took us about 4 years. In fact, the 610 West project that's right on the highway, that's managed, built, and designed by Doran Companies, actually the architect and the general contractor for the Hollows. And my second project, which I've been working with the sister city of Brooklyn Park, which is the city of Brooklyn Center, is called Wayneside Commons, which is also an affordable housing development, providing 54 units of workforce housing and sustainable housing for individuals and families. So for me, it's really important to make sure that we work with the communities and the cities that we partner with, and listen first and foremost, and let them know that their concerns, their comments weigh very heavily in terms of when it comes to my company, very much so, because at the end of the day, when you're doing a development, it's going to be there forever. And those residents that are living there, you need to have their blessing in order to move forward. And so you can have a good relationship. So really excited to hear more about this exciting location, and obviously great to see that Mr. Wellington David is here, a fellow Central grad like myself. So excited to hear his views and thoughts on this side as well. Thank you.
All right, David.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Johnny. Good to see you. So it's been 19 months, I think, since maybe a little longer, since we were last in front of each other, and I'm sorry that I'm virtual this time around. Just to recap who I am and what I do, I run my family's commercial real estate company that my dad started in 1985. It's based in St. Paul, where I grew up, and it's primarily a commercial property management company that also does development work. And we develop property or acquire property and then hold it for long periods of time. And most of the property that we own is closely held kind of within the family. So Steve, my dad, tends to be the general partner of property that we manage. And I am doing that as well. And we're kind of working through a kind of long, hopefully very long succession transition from him to me. I started working for the company 7 years ago. The company's got about 45 employees. And as I mentioned, we mostly manage commercial property. So we have about 100 buildings in the Twin Cities. We own about 4 million square feet of commercial property. And that's a mix, about half of it's office buildings, and about a quarter of it's retail, and a quarter of it's industrial. And then we have 600 or so units of housing that's kind of spread across low-income housing tax credit projects, and then mixed income and market rate income projects in the urban core in St. Paul, Minneapolis, as well as in suburban locations as well. We own property throughout the Twin Cities. We're in 20 different communities. We kind of have a mandate to not work on property that's more than 45 minutes drive time from headquarters. So we just want to know the real estate and have a pretty familiar understanding of what's going on in the neighborhood and in the community, and how that real estate is interacting with folks that are experiencing it on a day-to-day basis. And we have our property managers get assigned properties, and they also tend to work as our leasing agents. And so they work a deal with a prospective business and then end up being the property manager that manages the property and that lease that they negotiated with that business for oftentimes a decade or more. And so those relationships between the tenant and our property manager is really important and vital to our capacity to be able to serve our clients and customers well. We're for profit. We don't make any bones about that. We are very specifically trying to push hard and reinvest in our communities, and we do projects that need to make sense financially, but we have a long-term vision, and so we're not a build and flip, and so we don't have kind of an immediate need to make all of our money back, and we really tend to invest long-term in communities. And once we kind of get into one project, we tend to look around and start working on projects next door or nearby. And so you'd see if you took a look at our website and the map of properties that we own, there are many nodes throughout the Twin Cities where we own several properties right adjacent to each other. And that's just because we bought or built one, and then we started kind of getting to know the neighbors and got ourselves into more and more projects. I think one of the questions was, what have we been doing for the last 20 months or so? So early on in the pandemic, we have 110 retail tenants, and about 65 of them were looking for immediate relief for rent at the start of the pandemic. So between kind of March and July, we were fielding a lot of requests for relief and working through kind of complicated negotiations and providing relief. And we were, from my perspective, kind of negotiating against the fear of the unknown, which was pretty challenging. And thankfully, I think there was some relief provided by the federal government through the PPP program that gave everybody a little bit of cushion. And then we blessedly got the vaccines coming through in kind of November timeframe that helped people kind of see the end in sight from a retail perspective. So that soaked a lot of energy and time for 2020. And then we lost 3 buildings in the riots and fires in South Minneapolis. We sustained $35 million of loss with 3 buildings that burned to the ground. And so we spent a lot of last year rebuilding those buildings. And we've completed 2 of the 3 reconstructions, and we just received final certificate of occupancy today for the housing project that burned down right next to the 3rd precinct. And we'll be delivering that to tenants here in the next couple of days. We also were working on 200 acres of land development in Blaine at 109th and Lexington. We've done quite a bit of commercial development there with a couple of smaller retail buildings. And then we're working on selling the 2nd phase of land to Lennar for a 250 unit housing development that we did the preliminary utilities and land grading for, and they're building homes on that site. We sold land to Dominium for a senior affordable deal, and we're likely to build an apartment project on that site as well. And then we're working on a 223 unit market rate project in Minnetonka, right next to the light rail station that is going to be in the Opus Park. We started construction on that about 3 weeks ago. And we just delivered a 160 unit housing project right next to the soccer stadium in St. Paul, kind of in the neck of the woods that I grew up in. And we built a 100,000 square foot office building for the state of Minnesota down in the West Side Flats area of St. Paul, and delivered that to the state of Minnesota about 3 months ago. So we've been pretty busy. We're very active and certainly in growth mode right now. We've hired 12 people, which is like 33% increase of workforce over the last 18 months, which is a little unusual. But we're seeing very strong demand for suburban retail, some urban retail, certainly strong suburban market rate multifamily, and kind of across the board, we've got an affordable housing crisis throughout the Twin Cities, and there is no shortage of demand for that. Office is a kind of a touch and go market right now. I'd say more touch than go. A lot of businesses are trying to figure out their return to work plan and trying to push off decisions for either expanding or moving. And so that's kind of frozen the office market, relatively speaking. And industrial is probably the strongest asset class in real estate right now. And it's probably no surprise to anybody here, but the industrial market has become quite tight. And so there are many developers that are building what's called speculative buildings. They're building buildings that they don't necessarily have a tenant lined up for or have any leases signed for, knowing they're assuming that those buildings will get filled once they deliver those buildings to the market, which is an unusual and relatively risky position to take and requires a lot of capital and trust from their capital partners and their banking institutions to be able to do that. So that's what we've been up to.
Wow, you've been busy.
Yeah.
Thank you. The 2 of you have been able to look at the drawings of the ideas the community came up with, and I know that there was some interest in housing, particular senior housing based on the housing needs, but you just heard Paul talk about expected significant growth in the area, and you've heard a community member talk about the projection of aging people. You also heard restaurant, and we did too, and the people would like that site to have some, if restaurants are called commercial, some commercial activity, and it seems like an area that would serve the neighboring neighborhood, but might also draw people off the highway or other people who are looking for some resources in closer than where they are now, including a grocery store. So that's what the community was talking about. What did the two of you think about this site as you look at it now? If anything.
You know, one of the things that come to mind is, one, there's a lot of rooftops in the area. So means there's a lot of houses. These are things that, Trader Joe's, the Fresh Times, they look at first and foremost, obviously along with location. So, and then you also think about the redevelopment aspect, right? So that's going to come at a cost in terms of redeveloping the site. So if I put my development hat on, I look at location, I look at how much it's going to cost to either add to or tear down, because you need to throw that on top before you even start construction. And then also, speaking from an affordable housing standpoint, it's not in the QCT, a qualitative census tract. So these are things that we're looking at. And just so you know, qualitative census tract basically is an area where the federal government has designated that folks are making less money. So in essence, building housing there, there's an extra incentive in terms of points we are applying for low-income housing tax credits. So just with what I just gave you right now, these are things that I'm thinking of, as an affordable housing developer, saying it's not in the QCT. You need to redevelop the site. The Trader Joe's and the Fresh Times, great brands. Obviously, you have competition with, of course, Cup Foods, and it's a great place in terms of, I think someone mentioned Olive Garden. It's right next to the highway in terms of noise. So there's a lot of, it's very complex in terms of the things that I'm thinking of that could actually go there. But these are all great ideas. So the fact that, there's a lot of rooftops, you could do mixed use. That's something that's very attractive to me. Senior housing, so, these are things that, at least in my mind, having a conversation with the community and seeing, would that be an option? Would they be comfortable? Would the city be comfortable? Would they, be open to, these types of conversations in terms of, the types of development for, the future? Market rate obviously is right down the street with 610 West, and adjacent to the Quick Trip, you have, those townhouses, and then if you keep going north, you have single family homes. So, and then you have the school, which is adjacent also to the site. So, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, and with those possibilities comes at a cost. And as a developer, you're trying to figure out how can you reduce as much uncertainty. We haven't even gotten to the ground yet in terms of environmental and figuring out that component and seeing, is there any issues that we need to deal with in terms of the ground? So I know I'm probably speaking in terms of things that we're not seeing at, face value. We're just seeing, just in terms of, this is a site, we want to put something there. But in terms of development, we're always trying to, and I can't speak for David, but for me, what can I do that can, one, reduce as much uncertainty when it comes to, doing development, but also at the same time, making sure that we have a project, we have something that aligns with the community first and foremost. Because as I mentioned earlier, this development is going to be there long after I'm gone, right? So figuring out whether that be a grocery store, mixed use, housing, Is it going to be owner occupied or rental? I know affordable housing is something that is, obviously on the front page now because we need more. We're losing 4,000 to 5,000 units every year when it comes to natural affordable housing. Not to talk about housing that's actually given subsidy from the government when it comes to low-income housing tax credits. But you also have your market rate and obviously conversations surrounding rent control in St. Paul and Minneapolis, and seeing that's going to spread throughout the state. But I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of potential for this site, but it's going to come at a cost, and figuring out, support from the city and support from the community first and foremost in determining which direction we go to make sure that we're all in alignment in terms of, the end goal for the site.
Yeah, I tend to agree with pretty much what Johnny said. I think the site is a really good site for a variety of different options, kind of a menu of options. I think there, some of the asset classes that we were talking about at the previous discussion are probably off the table right now just because of the pandemic, and so the hospitality is probably out. And broadly, that's like a hotel is very unlikely that a developer would be able to, unless they have very strong personal balance sheet and will fully guarantee the deal, that a bank or a capital partner will want to come along with them and try to put a hotel on this site. So I think that's probably off the table. I don't know if anybody's going to be crying in their soup over that, but that's certainly the lay of the land right now. This feels to me like a mixed use site, and that could look like a horizontal mixed use or vertical mixed use, and kind of trying to describe those two. I think probably most that did that exercise, that they were kind of putting the different block diagrams around to understand that difference between horizontal and vertical mixed use. So vertical mixed use would have, a type of use, likely commercial retail on the first floor in that concrete podium, and then housing that is, in the developer terminology, stick built or made out of wood framing above it. Or you could do a horizontal mixed use where you have a different type of use in a different building, and there's separation across the parking lot or across green space or something like that. It's a large enough site, 7 acres, where you could get several buildings on the site and get the densification that you would need to be able to justify land proceeds that the city could use to be able to reinvest back into the community broadly, which I would assume is an objective of the city. I would not be surprised if they have ideas about where they would like to spend those dollars. This is a site that, from an economic development perspective, warrants investment and should generate investment to be able to drive additional tax base in the area. I know that there are concerns about gentrification and displacement with, a fancy project driving up land values or assessed values for properties, and then rents and taxes go up for homeowners and renters nearby, and that drives people out. I don't know that this project specifically could have that large of an impact on assessed values or rents nearby for that to be a significant issue. It usually takes kind of multiple kind of phased large developments that have institutional capital that are fundamentally changing the nature of the real estate landscape or the submarket to really have a large impact in gentrification and displacement. So I personally wouldn't be too concerned about that, but I'm an evil developer and I have different frame of reference than others. I think that there is a market, and we have seen a market in Blaine at 109th and Lexington for some types of restaurants. The restaurant category broadly is under a lot of pressure right now from the labor side and supply chain side. So, I mean, those are well recognized in the press. Nobody can find workers. I think yesterday I saw that restaurant workers was the largest category of increased employment in the unemployment numbers that were released by the federal government. So we're seeing that restaurant labor is really under a lot of pressure, and those wages are going up, which broadly is, I think, a good thing for everybody. But that is putting a lot of pressure on local restaurateurs to be able to make ends meet. And with new construction, you're at least 30, if not 50 or 60% higher in overhead from rent, or if you're going to own the building, from paying the bank. And that's just the nature of construction costs and land costs, and where we're at in the development cycle. So if you were able to, a restaurateur, if you were able to put your I'm a restaurateur hat on right now, to go get yourself into a second generation restaurant space inside a building that's already been built, that's going to be at least 30% cheaper than trying to get yourself into a new construction building that somebody would build on this parking lot. And so that just fundamentally puts the focus more on what is that business concept? How proven is it? What's the capital stack look like? Who are the funders behind it? Is that a franchise or is that a national credit? And can they pay the rents that are pretty expensive? And so that narrows the pool very dramatically and very quickly to brands that are well known, but maybe not as desirable from a personal perspective, to be located in this location next to a bunch of single family homes. That's just kind of the equation that is kind of fundamentally at play in the development market, particularly on the retail side. And so, you got to see, if you're going to see high rents, then you got to usually have kind of very specific concepts. And we talked about this the last time. Usually smaller concepts that are fast casual are able to make those rents work because there's a lot of throughput. Drive-throughs have been a godsend and a savior for a lot of restaurants through the pandemic, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So that's likely a piece of the equation. So site planning that in is pretty important. But kind of your more like 4,000 or 5,000 square feet or larger restaurants that are sit down, that are an hour-long dinner with table service. That's just a lot of overhead. That's not a lot of table churn. It's really hard to be able to make those the overhead costs make sense. And so you flip that around, then the developer can't get comfortable, plunking down a bunch of cash trying to get the contractor to go build a building and get the bank comfortable that this is going to be a winning enterprise. And obviously nobody wants the building to tip over and it to go into foreclosure. And so that's kind of the risk paradigm that we as developers are in. And we're trying to solve for, trying to create something special and unique and something that really matters and is going to be a wonderful asset for the community long-term, but also understanding that it's a very competitive landscape in the retail and restaurant side, and labor is super tight. Not a lot of folks are trying to jump in right now to build new restaurants or put their own personal financials at risk to be able to get a new concept going. And so it's a tough dynamic.
And John, you were nodding a lot as David was talking. Do you want to add anything else to this environment of retail and or restaurants, and what the draw might or might not be to this location?
David's 100% correct in everything that he said in terms of just the labor market, the shortage, in terms of just finding workers. I went to McDonald's and they're paying $15 an hour. When I was working at McDonald's, they were paying me $4.30 an hour. So I just gave away my age. So, at the end of the day, there is, at least in my opinion, a lot of opportunity with this site, but it has to be done carefully, especially in this climate. And, David talked about, investors and lenders being attracted to this site and making sure that, the developer has a plan that makes sense for them as well, but also at the same time makes sense for the city and for the community. Just being in development, the community may want one thing as well as the city, but it may not be feasible in the long run. So we need to figure out how we can find common ground when it comes to developments moving forward. I do think that, there's brands, I'm thinking of like Buffalo Wild Wings. I know there's one in Champlin. Then there's one in, Crystal. It's not really, it's a sit down, but then again, you can get it to go. That could be, maybe something if someone wants a franchise. I love the fresh time concept, natural, organic food. I think, that would be an awesome endeavor. And they love the fact that there's a lot of rooftops in the area, just from personal experience and work with Brooklyn Park. Trader Joe's, the nearest location is in Maple Grove. But I don't think, just from my conversation with them, that, at least right now, this location could be an option. But I think that if done correctly, if you have seasoned folks that, know what they're doing, there's a lot of possibilities, with this site that I think would, produce some certainty that would make not only the developer and its investors comfortable, but more importantly, the community in the city.
Great, thank you. I'm going to open it up and just ask anybody in the room who has a question or a comment for the developers and their expertise. Anybody want to say anything? Yeah.
So my question is around, the city a number of years ago did a redevelopment at Brooklyn Boulevard. And from my observations, that was kind of a failure. They built all this stuff, they did all this development, and nobody moved in. The rents were too high. It didn't work. And so I'm wondering what steps can be taken to prevent something like that happening with this development opportunity.
We have Paul or the city answer some of that.
I'm Todd Larson, Senior Planner. Been with the city for a little over 20 years and worked on some of those projects back in the day. Although my specialty is current planning, not so much the deals that go behind financing projects. In the case of the Brooklyn Boulevard Zane developments, the challenge there was that it was new construction, paying new construction prices when there were lots and lots of much older buildings around there with much more affordable rents. Throwing like the nature of the businesses and household incomes around it, it really didn't support it. And luckily, Hennepin Healthcare wound up taking over that entire building for medical uses.
Help answer your question. Not please.
Well, it sounds to me like it wasn't the right development for the area because, like you said, it didn't match the area. So my question though is like, what steps can be taken so that this doesn't happen, this development? Did we learn something from that development or?
Well, we learned something from what was there previously. Before that, there was a kind of sub-regional shopping center, the Village North Mall, that was aging. And as development in the Northwest Metro happened, the new shiny retail center kept moving. After Village North, then it moved over to West Broadway, Starlight Center. After that, it moved over to Maple Grove. So what we learned was that there was too much retail in the Brooklyn Boulevard and Zane area. And we got rid of a lot of it, tried to make it more of the right size for the neighborhood. Just building lots of retail, lots of restaurants, whatnot, and expecting it to be full is not actually realistic. People want more and more and more, but there's only so much to go around. And as David and Johnny were saying, that in today's market, there's even less. So what we want to make sure is whatever everyone's comfortable with going there, that it is truly the right size and isn't overbuilt and really does serve what it's intended to serve well without just going wild.
And you're primarily saying, can we anticipate and is there something we can do in advance to prepare this site for what we want?
Yeah, just anything that we can do, whether it's lessons learned or any sort of risk mitigation.
Great, and to be proactive about what the city might want in a particular site and find ways that might attract or might pave the way for the developer with the right ideas. You have a question back here? Thank you. You have a question?
Yeah, same question, or similar question, asking with a little bit different facts maybe. So in that area, the retail strip mall there has, 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units available. The CVS property took a long time to sell before CVS was built. And that office building, or that office strip mall right next to CVS, I think they just recently sold. I remember there's a big for sale sign up on that. And I'm not sure how many units are there. I mean, do you have any facts similar to what you're talking about with Brooklyn Boulevard, and anything about those units and how quickly they're selling and, you know, demand for property in that area?
Sure. What I can tell you about up at Oak Grove, 97th and Noble with the Noble Office Park and the CVS property, that all was designated as office property when the Deer Haven Estates neighborhood was developed. That corner was designated for office uses only. And I worked with Jim Skoglund, who is the developer of the Noble Office Park buildings. There was plans to do more, but the office market is really, really soft. Those are office condos. So as businesses go out of business or move into bigger digs or want to downsize, they put their unit up for sale. It's not the whole park that's for sale. So you might see perpetual signs, but it's for this unit, then that unit, kind of a thing. With many, many years of the corner sitting vacant because there wasn't a market for more office, there was interest from CVS to go in there. And we were very concerned because what the expectations of the neighborhood up there was that it would be some sort of quiet office use, daytime only, very limited, weekend, evening hours, definitely nothing late night. So working through not as quite of an extensive process as we're doing here with the immediate neighbors there to get their comfort level of doing a land use plan change from office to the neighborhood commercial to allow that CVS to get built. So that's there. And as you noticed, the Pine Brook Center down at 95th, right across the street from here, does have some vacancies. So if you guys want retail and retail has a home already, the concern, of course, is, do you do more? That's just going to be more vacancy. So it's kind of what we want to hear is, what do you want? What are you supporting? What will the market support? And what are we going to get?
I have some.
Thanks. Yes.
I really like the CVS. I live right by there and it was great. So I just wanted to say that it's great that it got put in. Loved it. I guess this is a question for both Johnny and David. What are some, like, because the way you guys are talking, you make it kind of sound like the deck's kind of stacked against a lot of different things. So what are some alternative ideas, maybe something around community, any other ideas maybe for the space, not for profit, but other, maybe for the residents? Like, I grew up in Bloomington. We had something called Chutes and Ladders. There was stuff like that around. So I don't know if that's really a suitable location, but I'm just trying to explain it conceptually.
Yeah, I was at Chutes and Ladders 2 weeks ago for a birthday party.
Yep, still there.
I mean, what I think you're talking about is something that's maybe not market based or market oriented from a financial perspective. And I mean, this is 7 acres that the city owns. They can, respond to the collective electorate. And if the electorate kind of pushes the city to do something different, like invest in parks or a solar garden, or you name it, if there's a will and there's resources, then there will be a way. And I mean, I'm not trying to argue you guys into like, hey, let me build your stuff. Like, I'm just trying to tell you, like, this is the market for what we're seeing right now for this type of property. And I mean, we work on all sorts of different types of projects, short-term, long-term, with very complicated kind of park dedication work and maybe too complex operating agreements with park boards and watersheds, to really complicated redevelopments of brownfield sites to get contamination out of the ground, and dirty industrial sites that need to get rejuvenated. And so, I mean, there's a there's a framing that you're hearing from me that is kind of a response of, this is the profession that I work in, and these are the tools that I have, and here are the types of projects that, you know, I can go to work on and capitalize and, you know, do. And you know, you wouldn't want to hire me to go build your park. Like, I'm not that good at that. I would go turn to a bunch of architects and landscape folks and be like, hey, what do you guys think? And then I would know like how to watch the dirt contractor pretty tight, but I wouldn't want to, like, you wouldn't want me installing the swings. And so that's like, I'm a conduit for information about what the market is and what type of demand is kind of out there, and what, generally speaking, a 7-acre site that's well located off of a pretty busy thoroughfare, and, you know, it's good intersection, and there's transit nearby, and there's grocery nearby, and there's also single family neighborhood nearby. And like, what does that tend to be like? You know, it could be a couple of different options, and here's like kind of what the market for those couple of different options is looking like right now.
Do you know like what any brands might be interested in, you know, opening up in that area? Just off the cuff.
I don't, I mean, you'd have to go, or I would have to go survey like 20 tenant rep brokers and kind of get a sense. You know, the probably the best comp that I have, or the most comparable site that we're working on right now, is Blaine, which is why I keep referencing it. It's not exact. The demos are different. The demographics are different in Blaine. The intersection's different. There's different retailers nearby. There's different, as Johnny mentioned, there's different rooftops and densities. Blaine is a very rapidly growing neighborhood, or a community, and as is Brooklyn Park. We're getting a lot of national retail interest. And so we just signed a Starbucks lease. We just signed a Jersey Mike's lease. We're working on a couple of other leases that are kind of large regional credits that are going to fill in a 10,000 square foot strip that's going to be full. And we're working with a 4,000 square foot restaurant concept that has 5 locations, that's more local, but has strong credit, and they've got a concept that is proven in a submarket similar to that. And we're likely to go build another spec 10,000 square feet of retail on that site because the demand has been so strong. Daycare is certainly very popular on that site, and frankly, banking institutions. We've had 3 banking institutions come at us really hard. They want standalone 4,000 square foot banks with the drive-through. And then we sold land to a 60,000 square foot medical office building. And so that's kind of the array. That's the menu of different types of uses that are showing up throughout the pandemic. We were able to sign leases last year and sell land last year during the pandemic for those uses, which we were, I think, frankly, very surprised by.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, we talked a little bit about the challenges for the site, the traffic, the kind of the connecting to a residential area where people are expressing concern about the impact on them and their housing. Johnny, you mentioned we don't even know the contamination, if any. So there's some information that we don't have, but it sounds like the opportunities are pretty mixed, at least from a market perspective. Is there, this I think goes back to the city, but is there political will to really make this happen? Is this a priority site? And have you had any interest in the site?
I have a question.
Yes.
It seems to me that since the community is growing aggressively, and we're talking about a potential over the next 5 or 10 years, 90 plus, maybe even 100,000 people. Have we thought about a multifaceted family entertainment center of some type? Does that make sense?
You want to have the developers respond to that question first?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. Thank you so much. You know, Brooklyn Park is growing. Obviously, continue to go north, you're starting to see a lot more development for single family homes in your sister city, Champlin. But again, it boils down to the community. What does the community want collectively in partnership with the city? And as David says so eloquently, there's interest. It could be regionally, it could be nationally. If it's done correctly in conversations with the city and the community, I think that there could be a range of different possibilities. As I mentioned earlier, the redevelopment of this site, figuring out, in terms of the site itself, what can it sustain? Looking at the environmentals, whether it be a movie theater or a restaurant, Starbucks, a grocery chain. Its location, I think, is something that, everyone's going to be paying attention to. But also, and I'm speaking as a developer, but also as someone that lives in Brooklyn Park, things that I would like to see there as well. One of the things that I think would, and I keep going back to mixed use, is that we are facing, an affordable housing crisis, right? And we need more housing for folks that, or either in, natural affordable occurring housing that is being depleted annually, or they're in market rate that they can't afford, so they're living paycheck to paycheck. If you were able to do a project where maybe, you pair that up with market rate and the city supports, the affordable units with, let's say, TIF, and maybe, there's a component where, you have maybe a national brand such as a grocery or restaurant. So in essence, the first level is commercial, and, the 4 levels above are housing for a combination of market rate and affordable. That to me seems like, something that investors, something that the city, something that the community collectively, I think, can all agree upon. If it's just straight commercial, then, something that is, just geared towards that, at least in my mind, someone made a comment in terms of numerous, I think it was Todd, the vacancies that were on Brooklyn Boulevard. No one wants that. We want to make sure that by these types of conversations that we're edging closer to as much certainty as possible with the redevelopment of the site. So I'm gearing towards housing with commercial for this site. And then to Ike's point in terms of, parks and something that's more public oriented, that's an awesome idea. I think having a conversation with the city and your elected officials would, be something that, with 7 acres, pending, what could be accomplished, could be an opportunity as well. I go back to these conversations that I think are so critical in the due diligence process, and making sure that we get it right the first time, not the second time, is extremely important in order for us to be able to find ourselves in a situation that both the developer, the city, the community, and the banks that are involved, because that is part of the conversation, making sure that they're able to get the rate of return back as they're partners with, the owner and operator, as they move forward. But, these are things as a developer, we think of and look at all the time to make sure that we are in a situation that makes sense both objectively and strategically.
Great, thank you. David, could you address the idea, we have it was the same question about entertainment. I was just gonna have you.
Oh, the entertainment question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back to the city.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part, Barbara.
I said, after you respond to the entertainment possibility, then we'll get back to the city's question.
Okay, got it. I don't have a great sense for kind of what the current market is for kind of large entertainment. That's probably the best answer. I think it's possible. I don't have any reason to think you couldn't, like a developer couldn't get that done, or if the city wanted to step into more of a development role, that they could potentially try to do some sort of public-private partnership. I mean, I think there are a lot of retail type uses or entertainment type uses that have suffered pretty dramatically through the pandemic. But I also think that the pandemic has been this has done a really good job of helping us focus on what's important, and being able to get into a kind of an entertainment scenario with other people. I think a lot of folks like me who've been sitting in their basement for 15 months with 2 kids under 4, that sounds like a pretty good plan. So I would go to that. So would I try to chase that type of use? Certainly. I think it's probably not the thing that's going to be the anchor for the entire 7-acre development, because it's probably a little bit of a long shot, and I don't have a great sense for the demand. Where I do have a pretty good sense of the demand for market rate housing, mixed income housing, low income housing, like Johnny's been talking about, and some of the retail that we've been discussing in Blaine, for instance.
Great, thanks. So now we'll go back to the city. We asked about political will to really make a deal happen, or resistance to some of the ideas, or is there a demand for the property? You got any interest that's showing up about it?
Well, I can address a little bit about the inquiries we've had over the years. The site, as you all know, was a park and ride for a bunch of years, and then it got full, and I worked with Metro Transit on the site for the new, after we tried everything to figure out could they accommodate and expand the park and ride on the site. When it was clear that they were moving, then the question was what next? There was a little bit of time where Metro Transit, Met Council, and MnDOT kind of had to figure out who actually owned the property. And then when it kind of settled down that MnDOT owned the property and they didn't want to have anything to do with it, then basically it kind of went on the market. And we were getting calls from all sorts of things, but mostly it were things like mega churches. They saw a big parking lot, and as long as they threw up a little building, they were good. The concern at the time was all these tax exempt properties taking up the city's most valuable real estate really affected our tax base here. We're not a tax base rich community like Edina, Minnetonka, Maple Grove, with all that high value stuff to offset your property taxes on a single family home, townhome kind of a thing. So the driving factor for the EDA to buy this land was that it didn't go tax exempt. That the $1.2 million that we spent in it, the expectation at that time was we're going to get $1.2 million back in selling the property, if not more, and then annual payments for the property tax. I've talked with all sorts of developers over the years, and most of them have come forward with some sort of mixed use, not necessarily mixed use building, kind of retail with multifamily, but they all seem to have some sort of multifamily component with some sort of retail component, whether it's a standalone, but not very big of retail. And unit wise, I kind of want to say that it was somewhere in the range of 150 to 300 units. And what we told folks is that this is a drastic change from what's there today. This is something that was not expected to be here and would be a shock to the neighborhood. And we have committed to the neighbors that we're going to work with them. Hence this series of meetings of what do you as neighbors want to see here? What would you embrace to be in the neighborhood? What does make your neighborhood better? At the same time, what's going to be good for the community, not just your individual block, your mile radius, kind of the whole picture. That's what we want to hear from you. And then, as Paul mentioned earlier, once we get the direction, the blessing from the EDA, then we go out and find these developers and have a whole nother series.
Yes, and here's a mic.
It's
screen, you just need to talk close.
Thank you. I just wanted to offer my opinion. I just want to offer my opinion. What about Brooklyn Park is a diverse community, which means we should focus on something that promotes our diversity. If we build a multi-level market for restaurants, multi-level floor restaurants at this particular place, from Asian to Mexican to you name it, Greek, in a place where people can come to bring their families to sit down and dine in our city. Not only would it be a benefit to Brooklyn Park, we have restaurants here, it also provides an opportunity for people to come to Brooklyn Park, to patronize Brooklyn Park, to explore the restaurant industry in our community, that they can go on every level within this particular development marketplace, food marketplace, and explore any food from around the world right here in Brooklyn Park that represents our unique diversity that we do have, excuse me, here in Brooklyn Park. So I think that's something that we should put on the table to consider, that I think is an advantageous opportunity, unique opportunity for us to capitalize on this opportunity. Is parking there already? We erect the building, 3-4 floors, restaurants available, spaces in there. We start pitching it to restaurant owners who want to come in there and provide their particular service to the community in every particular, not every, but in as many countries around the world. I'm gonna say countries because I'm talking about diverse food. So whoever come in and rent space to sell their product or good or services to our community, it will be most advantageous. Will make us as a destination place in Brooklyn Park, not only for us, but if people come here, it creates foot traffic in our community. Foot traffic generates a lot of money in anybody's city. We lack foot traffic in our community because we have nothing in our community for people to come here to do. If 10,000 people left or came here just at lunchtime and spent $10 alone in this community, that's $100,000 for that one particular day. Times 5 days a week is $500,000. Times a month is $2 million that we would generate. And not only the money that we would generate foot traffic in Brooklyn Park to give people a reason to come to Brooklyn Park, to explore the uniqueness that we claim that we are. So I just wanted to offer my opinion about that, my thoughts on that. Again, is parking lot ready? We just need to erect a building.
Johnny, you want to take
Thank
that?
you. Somebody wanted to respond?
You know, I like food, and
Well, you know,
that was a fabulous. Thank you for those comments. That was, you know, I participated in a discussion with the city about 4 years ago, and this similar conversation came up. I'm an immigrant, so I came in when I was 1. I'm Nigerian, so I've always loved the diversity that this city brings in terms of just all walks of life, you know, here in the city. So I echo your comments. If done correctly, it would be a fabulous idea. I think it's Sherman Associates. They have a similar concept that's been successful. I think the Midtown Exchange.
Midtown Global Market, yeah.
Yeah, Midtown Global Market, I'm sorry. And yeah, so I think if it's done correctly, that could be pretty entertaining in terms of, you know, folks willing to come to this great city that I call home and experience the diversity of the population that we serve and have here. Right up the street, my wife, she's also Nigerian. There's a restaurant that she goes to and grabs us food. And I go to a restaurant in Osseo. It's a Euro. They serve Euro. So I'm always trying to mix things up here in Brooklyn Park and the nearby cities, just into the diversity of the cultures and the people here. So I think that was a fabulous idea. And if it's done correctly, that could definitely be successful.
Great. Yeah, and he was combining a few things that came in the first series. Can we be a destination? Can we have a restaurant? Can we build on our cultural richness? So he was kind of putting that all together, and the smaller footprint for the commercial, so could be worth looking at. Now, David, were you going to say anything else?
Sure. So I've got, I think, a couple of comments. I really like the idea and the concept a lot. I echo Johnny's comments. You had me until you said vertical. Multi-story is really difficult for restaurants because the mechanical equipment for restaurants it's like 50% of the cost, if not more. It's a ton of money, the HVAC, the mechanical equipment. And there's a lot of venting that needs to occur. And so if you have to go through multiple floors, it increases the cost exponentially. And so if that concept is one that gets kind of baked, there's going to be a lot of gap financing that's going to need to occur, and somebody's going to have to pay for that expansion of cost because it's not going to be the most efficient way to be able to get those restaurants all together in one space. The most efficient way to do that would be have one big building that is one level. Not dissimilar to like Malcolm Yards, the food hall that was just opened like 3 months ago, 5 blocks from my house over here in Prospect Park in Southeast Minneapolis, in a very strong submarket, stronger than Brooklyn Park by a little bit, and is doing quite well, not coincidentally, because it is immediately adjacent both to Surly, which is a destination brewery, but also because it is very proximal to 50,000 university students, and right on the bus line between the two campuses, which I think is a big reason that it is successful. And I'm personal friends with John Wall. I was with him just before this meeting, who's the developer for that. And he has said that they've got really good traffic in that food hall with, I think, 7 different restaurants in it. And it's a lot of young people. And so you got to have kind of foot traffic and young people and a reason for them to come to be able to really generate that, the wallets that you're talking about, that are going to make that type of concept successful. We're working with Neighborhood Development Center, which is the operator for Midtown Global Market, which is what Johnny was referencing, that Ryan and Sherman and Neighborhood Development Center collaborated to build down on Lake Street in South Minneapolis, just off on the northeast corner of Lake in Chicago. It is more vertical, and there's an office component to it, that's medical office, I believe, for Alina. And then there's condos above it. It's a very complicated project. It was a huge feed for the city for many, many years and was very unpleasant because it did not make any money for a long period of time. And so just know that there is a kind of an unfortunate little shining symbol down in South Minneapolis right now that, you know, the folks that actually know the underpinnings of that deal know that it was very expensive and cost the city a lot of taxpayer money to be able to feed until it got off the ground. I think it's still a feed on some level. And so we are also working with NEON, Northside Economic Opportunity Network, which is Northside nonprofit that provides technical assistance and support for Northside entrepreneurs in North Minneapolis, located on West Broadway. They are working on a food hall concept to build on West Broadway, 20,000 square feet, 2 stories. We're the kind of the development consultant for them on that project pro bono. And I can tell you that the cost for 2 stories of food grade infrastructure is really expensive, like $450 to $500 per square foot, which is like 2.5 times what it would be for just a regular restaurant in a strip retail center. So it's hard to get that concept to really make sense financially.
Okay, thank you. But we're after 8 and we know we want to close at 8:30. And I want to just make sure that all of you who have a question have had a chance to ask or to be in conversation with the developers. Anyone else? Sarah? Oh, sorry, what?
Again,
Yeah,
Rich,
go ahead.
I like to be the negative one in the group here, but I hear all these great ideas, restaurants, retail outlets, breweries. They sound great, but if you're living right behind it, you have a different perspective as well too. So if the city and developers are sincere about making sure this works with everyone, please don't exclude the neighborhood from this discussion, because we know it's going to be redeveloped. We're aware of that. Just be considerate of your existing taxpayers at the backyard.
Very good reminder. Anyone else? Can I come back to you in a second? Sarah, anyone on, okay, on Zoom? This is your last chance to get a question in. So yes.
Thank you once again. I just wanted to add to what you were saying. I'm not opposed to a high rise or just a one level. The opportunity for that restaurant to exist is important. And to the residents concerned who just spoke, I'm sure they will love that because it's close to their house. They can walk and go eat at all those particular different restaurants. So that's just my thinking and my thoughts. And once again, we'll create a destination place for Brooklyn Park, as well as foot traffic for Brooklyn Park, and not only Brooklyn Park, but those that's coming into our community. They'll have a place to come bring their families to dine in our community as well, and spend some of that money here in Brooklyn Park. So I just want to continue to throw that ideal out there because it's a unique idea. And I believe Brooklyn Park, we're a unique community. We need to lead in the forefront as pioneers of such things, some things that other communities are not doing. And so that's what I'm seeking for, those advantages to happen within our city that showcases our city and embraces our diversity by celebrating, open up doors and opportunities for our diverse community to open up these opportunities in our community. So I think we'll be doing just what we align to do. And I'm Boyd Morrison as well, your city councilman.
Thank you. All right, everyone, we're closing up. I want to thank our panelists for coming and spending time and sharing with us their experience and opinions and reacting to questions. I want to thank everybody here for coming. There was a big gap in our conversation, so it's great to see so many of you come back and reconnect and try to catch up. And thanks to the folks who are on Zoom and who attended remotely. So great conversation, great ideas, great questions. And I'm just going to turn it over to Gretchen, who will talk about our last meeting.
All right, so thanks for all of the additional input and thoughts as we recollect the ideas from the community for what would be a good fit for this property and things that we should be careful about. What we'll be trying to do is re-summarize all of the work that happened before and include what happened today and bring to you a document for review and refinement that explains what summarizes what the community's voices have been. We're also trying to be sure we're incorporating the wisdom of the development community and the people who know kind of how investment works within for a project. So we're not like asking for things that are highly unlikely, but have kind of been reasonable in terms of the developer's perspective as well. So we hope that you'll all be able to come back again next Tuesday for the same process. Now, in this situation, the best way to participate will be in the room because we'll be working together to fine tune the document. And so it gets a little bit difficult to navigate between a virtual format and an in-person format. So if at all possible, and if you want to be most actively involved in that discussion, we invite you to join us here at the City Hall so that we can be together and have that chance to work on this document. So we hope you'll all come back in next Tuesday, and I know it'll be colder because the snow is coming. And we hope that we'll be able to provide a really good feedback and information for the city for their next steps and considerations. So with that, We will ask you to be giving us some feedback and survey. If there are other things that you didn't get to say at the session, please just write it on that green form. And for the online folks, we'll be sending you the document, just following up from this discussion. And anything I'm missing, Barbara? Okay, so thank you all for your time and your participation tonight. Thanks to our developers, David Wellington and Johnny Opara. We really appreciate your input. And have a good rest of the evening.